How are you?
Yes.
Red dot means autumn.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, thank you.
It's been a minute, yeah, I don't get out.
What?
Any other questions?
Are we going first or you don't know?
I don't know.
Thank you for sending it.
Yes, of course. Glad to
Good morning. Everybody's awake this morning. House Transportation Committee for February 20th, 24, now in session. We'll ask Mr. Adams to please call the roll.
Representatives Burkhart, Butler, Camper, Carr, Cochran, Darby, Davis, Glenn, Grills, Harris, Hazelwood, Marsh, Martin, Pearson, Powell, Powers, Rudd, Russell, Sherrill, Towns, Whitson, Wright, Vice Chairman Vital, Chairman Howell.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, sir. Any personal orders from the committee? Any announcements from the committee? Seeing none, members, we have one item on the calendar today, followed by a presentation. We have some guests with us today from the Tennessee American Society of Civil Engineers. I think you'll find it interesting, and they're going to be telling us some things about the Tennessee infrastructure. But first, let's get to our calendar. Item number 1, House Bill 2145 by Representative Martin. Have a motion and a second. Sir, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. House Bill 2145 came to me from a local judge in my county, as well as law enforcement. And it's obvious that law violations happen when a car owner covers or simply does not have their license plate on their vehicle. However, a plate flipping device can instantly obscure and change a license plate while the vehicle is in motion. And these devices are being sold in Tennessee as in other states, and they are being used to conceal the owner's identity from law enforcement. Criminals could switch the license plates on the back of their vehicle with just the click of a button to avoid detection in situations such as an Amber Alert, effectively concealing the identity as they kidnap a child. This is also crucial as we will soon see the construction of choice lanes in our state, and someone could travel one of these lanes, flip their plate, and avoid the detection to prevent payment. This bill addresses the problem in 2 ways. First, the bill would make the manufacturing and selling of these devices in Tennessee a Class A misdemeanor. And second of all, this bill would make the purchasing or possessing of a license plate flipper in Tennessee a Class B misdemeanor. So the intent behind this legislation is to aid police in proactively engaging those who wish to tamper with license plates before chasing a criminal in a potentially dangerous pursuit. Additionally, this bill would set a precedent that drivers must be held responsible for their choices on Tennessee roads. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you for
Any
the
questions?
explanation. Any questions or comments from the committee? Representative Davis, you're recognized.
Thank you, Representative Martin. This is something that's new to me, and I appreciate you bringing this legislation. I think that that's really an important point in protecting our choice lanes and how they're be able to take advantage of that. And then also with respect to human trafficking, that's a critically serious issue that's going on. And so thank you very much for this legislation. I truly appreciate it.
Any other questions? If you would withdraw, we have Leader Camper, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've never heard of this either, but did I hear you say that the manufacturer will be could be criminally charged if they sold this in the state of Tennessee?
Yes, ma'am. The bill would have a Class B misdemeanor for purchasing and possessing, and a Class A for manufacturing and selling.
Follow up? Okay. Any other? If you recall, those of you who are on sub, if you're on full and not in sub, while we were considering this bill in sub, I did a quick search on my iPhone, quickly learned that you can buy these flippers on Amazon for $16.79. So it's much more common than what I knew. Any other questions? If not, without objection, we're going to vote on House Bill 2145. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Your bill goes to finance, sir. Thank you very much. Members, we're going to move from the calendar into our hearing, and we'll ask our guests to come forward to the table there, if you would. They're going to give us a recent report card of Tennessee infrastructure. And we have with us Monica Sarton, who is Assistant Professor of Civil and Environmental Engineering at Lipscomb University, And my constituents, Lucas Wright, Vice President with Wright Industrial Group, they have a few things to share with the committee, so we welcome you. And thanks for coming. I look forward to hearing what you have to say. So you're recognized.
Thank you. Good morning.
If I may first, we're going out of session.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting us here today. My name is Monica Sarton. I'm an assistant professor of civil environmental engineering at Lipscomb University and the chair of the American Society of Civil Engineers Tennessee Section Infrastructure Report Card Committee.
And my name is Lucas Salyer. I'm a vice president with Wright Industrial Group and one of the authors of the 2022 Tennessee Infrastructure Report Card.
We're here today to talk with you about the 2022 report card for Tennessee's infrastructure. As stewards of our infrastructure, civil engineers are responsible for the planning, design, construction, operation, and maintenance of our vital public works. With that responsibility comes the obligation to periodically assess the state of our infrastructure, report on its condition and performance, and advise on the steps necessary to improve it. Using a simple A to F school report format, the report card provides a comprehensive assessment of current infrastructure conditions and needs and provides recommendations on how to improve the grades. It's an independent report prepared by engineers and other ASCE members from across the state using publicly available data. In 2022, we reviewed 13 areas of infrastructure, with the state receiving an overall grade of C. This was the same grade determined by the 2016 report, but we added sections, saw decline in others, improvement in some areas, while other categories remain the same. In addition to an evaluation of each area, we provided a high-level look at challenges seen throughout the report, as well as recommending solutions. Overall, these grades show that Tennessee legislators and agencies are continuing to work hard at improving our built environment, but there is plenty of work left to be done to reach a level of good standing conditions statewide. The Tennessee section of the American Society of Civil Engineers has some suggestions to help raise the grades. One of the challenges identified by the report card is deferred maintenance. Some categories, like parks, have seen major strides in eliminating backlog, but we still have other areas where this remains a challenge. The solution for deferred maintenance is to fully fund infrastructure projects so agencies are better able to address our aging systems. Now Lucas will talk about a few of those areas.
Yeah, so our first area for discussion is aviation. Aviation was one of the few categories to see a grade drop in Tennessee, as it received a B- in 2016 and is now a C+ in the 2022 report card. Major commercial airports saw massive growth over the last decade in the state, but caps on the fuel tax and limitations on passenger facility charges present problems in the future. Insufficient funding mechanisms are adding strain to the mobility sectors and cutting into our region's potential growth. Tennessee's airports now face a $3 billion funding gap, which will cost the state many jobs if the gap is not closed. Meanwhile, freight and passenger traffic are growing rapidly. Passengers at Nashville International Airport doubled between 2010 and 2019, and Memphis International Airport remains the biggest freight operation in the United States, with FedEx's One World hub being located there. Our state's location and partnership with FedEx means that we play an integral role in the regional and national economy. As the fuel tax and passenger facility charge caps are unlikely to change, we must explore alternative funding methods to close this gap so that our passenger and freight services don't begin to experience delays due to faulty infrastructure. Many of the Tennessee's airport facilities have been in existence for over 50 years, and most of their roots trace back to simple grass landing strips, which evolved into public use facilities. As demand has and will continue to increase, these facilities face numerous challenges to meet user needs. In most cases, relocating and establishing a new airport facility to replace an aging facility simply isn't feasible. Therefore, continuous investment in our current facilities must exist. This investment is vital in responding to several factors, such as increases in threats to public safety and welfare, passenger travel and services, as well as aircraft size and capability. Our recommendations to raise the grade in aviation include addressing the critical funding shortfalls related to the aviation fuel tax decrease and single contributor caps, accelerate and increase investment in airport improvement programs, such as the pavement management program, and prioritize projects which increase capacity. Additionally, we would implement and enhance technology related to the FAA's Next Gen initiative, including safety improvements. So taking a step back now and looking at one of the overall challenges we came across in the report card was resiliency. This was a challenge among various categories examined, and most of our elements of infrastructure are near or past the end of their designed life cycle. So when you combine this with increases in population and more frequent extreme weather events, our infrastructure struggles to keep up with current conditions and capacity. Therefore, special attention must be paid to these trends when planning and funding future projects. Solutions to address these challenges include considering and accounting for growth and further extreme weather events when planning and funding. By utilizing population data and weather trend analysis, we can improve the resiliency of future projects and extend the planned useful life of these infrastructure assets. So now we'll move back to one of the specific categories, which was roads. I know it's a popular category among the legislative, and a lot has been done, particularly since this report card came out, to advance this category. But Tennessee has over 95,000 miles of highway that are critical for residents, visitors, and the movement of approximately $812 billion worth of goods shipped annually to and from the state. Tennessee's roads are generally in good or fair condition and earned a grade of C, which exceeded the national average. Tennessee's economic and population growth have led to an increase in the demand for vehicle travel on the state's major roadways. This increase in traffic demand is predicted to put additional strain on Tennessee's roads and will lead to increased congestion as well as a reduction in TDOT's level of service. TDOT identifies that traffic congestion is a major and growing problem, and it results in serious inconvenience and frustration to motorists through increased delays, negative impacts to trade and commerce, increased pollution, and wasted energy through additional fuel consumption. Tennessee's population surpassed 6.9 million in the 2020 census, which is a 9% increase since 2010. Increasing congestion has led to those noticeable increases in travel time, particularly in the state's largest metropolitan areas. And I'm sure this is of no surprise, or anyone's not aware of this happening in Nashville, as it's obviously the most congested area of our state. Additionally, TDOT forecasts a substantial increase in volume on the roads by the year 2040, and the state's infrastructure will be unable to handle the future needs. Maintenance of roads and bridges is an ongoing need, and more can be done to improve the quality of roads. In 2021, Tennessee invested more than $1 billion in road and bridge maintenance, rehab, and construction to combat the effects of an aging infrastructure and growing population. While this investment was a step in the right direction, new funding sources are needed to maintain and improve Tennessee's roads. Relying on the 27.4 cent per gallon gas tax is not sustainable as cars become more efficient and more electric cars join the roadways. So recommendations to raise the grade for roads include pursuing additional funding options by considering alternative strategies and prioritizing projects and programs across the state related to capacity. It's worth noting that subsequent to the issuance of the 2022 report card, the Tennessee legislature took significant steps towards this goal by passing the Transportation Modernization Act and investing more than $3.3 billion in Tennessee's infrastructure. Additionally, the consideration of choice lanes through the public-private partnership also addresses the need for consideration of alternative strategy, and we applaud these efforts by the legislative body. Monica?
All right, and now we'll talk about bridges. Bridges remain the same as 2016 at a B. We all know that multiple projects were completed between 2016 and 2022 through initiatives like the Better Bridges program, which helped reduce the number of poor bridges. So we'd expect the grade to improve. However, with each passing year, our bridges only continue to age. With over 20,000 bridges within Tennessee, their impact on connectivity, commerce, safety, prosperity, and a myriad of other aspects is far-reaching. The majority of the bridges in our state are in good to fair condition. However, locally owned bridges are typically in worse condition than the statewide average. To help with local challenges, the Tennessee legislative body decreased the required local match and provided funding in the 2017 Improve Act for local bridge replacement projects. But with each new bridge, all the thousands of others turn another year older, with the impact of its continued use contributing to its overall condition. Funding that includes provisions for rehabilitation as well as future growth is critical to help fight the march of time. Our recommendations: maintain or increase annual investment levels for transportation funding, specifically bridge repair, preservation, and rehabilitation. Continued focus on addressing and reducing the number of poor bridges in poor condition. Continued support of research, technologies, and initiatives to develop more resilient bridges. Next up, we'll talk about transit. Tennessee's transit currently sits at a D+, no change from 2016. Although there are transit opportunities in all counties throughout Tennessee, ridership is still low. Tennessee was slated to receive $1.7 billion for transit from the IIJA to help deal with resiliency challenges, but we're a long way off from reaping the benefits of a robust transit system. Residents with mobility options are choosing transit less and clogging roads with private vehicles. For those choice riders to return to transit, dedicated funding streams like regional sales tax are necessary for significantly enhanced service in Tennessee's 4 large urban areas. I personally commute through Nashville interstates and would love more transit options, but I'm also the person who goes to DC and loves using the metro. Not everyone, particularly those in our state, prefer mass transit options. We need to look at the needs of our state to design solutions that will work in our state. We also need to make sure that those solutions are equitable so that people from all people groups across the state are helped by them. Our recommendations: secure dedicated funding for transit in Tennessee's 4 large and urban areas, increase access to transit in urban, suburban, and rural communities so that all Tennesseans have more and better transportation choices, increase education about navigating transit, including its benefits and how to use it.
So in summary, Tennessee's infrastructure systems are doing their part to keep residents safe and the economy moving, but aging assets, increasingly severe weather events, and surging population growth threaten the long-term viability of these networks. As I noted before, notable progress has been made since this 2022 report, and we applaud in those efforts. As we close, I'd like to take a moment to recognize all the expert authors who contributed to the 2022 Tennessee Infrastructure Report Card. As you can see, the list includes engineers and professionals from across the state, all of who volunteered their time and resources to research, evaluate, and collaborate in the interest of raising awareness and advancing the state of Tennessee's infrastructure. We thank you for the opportunity to present to you today and look forward to working with the committee to find solution to our state's infrastructure investment needs. With that, we'll be glad to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Salyer and Ms. Sarton. Thank you very much. Good information, and certainly presents a challenge to us as a state and as a committee. Any questions for our presenters today? Representative Chairman Grills, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. Just a couple of things I want to hit up on or follow up on is the aviation fuel tax that you brought up. Are there any states out there that have that the cap indexed? Are there other states out there that have a similar situation to what we have here in Tennessee?
Yeah, so it's interesting. State by state, everybody chooses to address this in a different way. And what I didn't say in this that I recognize is the challenge that we had in capping fuel tax in our state was that other states were attracting FedEx to leave. I think most people know that. Some were offering for FedEx to pay no tax at all, which presents a tremendous challenge to the legislators. But so the answer to your question, and I hope I'm answering it correctly, is that each state does something different. Some have no fuel tax, some have single contributor caps like we have now. Some have higher aviation fuel taxes. It's just, it varies. I don't see a lot of consistency overall. And I will qualify that by saying I've not researched every state.
Okay.
Follow up?
Thank you for that. And you said something about the road, talking about the road conditions,
Mhm.
and you were complimentary on the money that was put in there last year. But going forward, how much more can the market actually handle as far as money being put into it for paving, for new road builds and things of that nature? Where are we at as far as the point where we're having diminishing return?
Right.
as far as what the market can handle, and we're driving the price up because we're putting so much money into that.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm not sure that I have a straightforward answer for you on that. I would tell you that a lot of what's changed over the years is like how thick the pavement is, for example, when we pave a project, because the cost has changed. You know, we used to pave 4 to 6 inches, and now it's less than that in some areas. So we've tried to balance some of that. I think because infrastructure is so widely needed and used by virtually everyone, even if you're in your own home and you don't get out a lot, you still have goods and services delivered through infrastructure, that the market is there to support any investment that would be there. We've seen foreign companies come in looking at the P3 partnerships. That's attracted some new folks to the market, but I don't think any investment will result in a diminished return. I think it depends on the mechanism that we use. So if we're looking at the gas tax, which I know most people in this legislative body worked on in 2017 and then again last year, that was a much needed increase and really was delayed for years and years and years, right? It had not been increased since 1989 before 2017. And so at the time, it's what we needed. Now we have a different challenge with electrical vehicles, the addition of choice lanes. But I will point out one of the best things about our road system, in particular TDOT and this legislative body, is we don't have any debt for our system, you know, and that we are one of, I think, 7 states now that does not go in debt for our roads. So we have in my opinion, have done a great job managing this. We just got to look at the mechanism that funds us forward. Did I answer your question?
You got there.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. I was
Okay.
trying. I'll be glad to talk to you about it
Yeah,
after if
thank
I
you.
need to.
Is that it?
That's good.
Representative Powell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you being here today. Could you speak to how, I guess, the grade of C compares nationally to other states?
Yeah, so every 4 years, American Society of Civil Engineers rates the nation as a whole. So we typically fare better as a nation as a whole. There's some states that we do better in, things like roads and bridges, because we don't have as much. Well, one, our infrastructure just isn't as old as some as maybe the northeastern states. We don't have as bitter winters and things like that. So there's a lot of areas in the report that we do better in. And then there's some areas that we don't. I would say as a whole, Tennessee typically fares better than other states, particularly like surrounding states, but not in every category. So it just kind of depends.
Follow up?
Yes, and one last question. So, speaking of transit, I saw you had a grade of a D+. I don't want to say that's generous. I'd probably give us an F. Have you seen, one of the things too that strikes me is when you lack other transit options, then you're basically increasing the stress that's on your roads. Do you find in other states and other cities and places and different communities around the country, when you have these transit options, it helps alleviate some of the problems that you see with the roads and bridges?
So our report just looks at Tennessee, but as comparison, before I started at Lipscomb, I traveled a lot for my work and did engineering projects across the U.S. And like I mentioned during the presentation, I really enjoy using mass transit options, Metro, L, rail, all of those things. And whether or not it helps the city as a whole, as a personal like commuter, that definitely helped me. You know, it frees up my time to do other things. So I think mass transit helps individuals and takes away things like worry about car care maintenance. So a lot of other things that can add up. I think in Tennessee, we have a lot of people who just love driving their cars, right? I mean, I like the freedom of having a vehicle that I can take anywhere. But if we had the freedom that our transit could take people anywhere too, I think people would use it more often.
I would add too, I think maybe to your general question, certainly alternative investment in transit would alleviate capacity in some way, right? I mean, it's just logical to get to that. But like Monica said, it's a choice still. They have to choose to use it.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. On your slide with the grades, you gave wastewater a C minus. Can you explain to us what all went into the calculation that got us to a C minus?
Sure. So our wastewater takes into consideration things like combined sewer overflow, a lot of inflow and infiltration within pipes, and the information that's publicly readily available for our water systems across the state is not as robust as maybe our transit systems. So it's that evaluation is a little different than being able to look at the data that like TDOT puts out and doing quantitative evaluations of that. So for this, we're looking at more of things like problem areas that come up, reports or warnings from different systems, and then things like the combined sewer overflow, how much we expect is coming through inflow and infiltration to being treated at our plants. So there's a lot of other things that come into play for that area.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. I imagine there were one part of the state may have been better or worse than the other part. But did you all look at West Tennessee with respect to Ford and SK coming and maybe the potential concerns there with infrastructure in general, but wastewater in particular?
I'm sorry, could you, with Ford coming?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
You're talking about the battery facility?
Yes.
Yeah, I used to travel to Memphis a lot, so I know what you're
Okay.
talking about.
It's going to
Yeah.
be a lot of water that's needed and moving it out. And I know we invested in infrastructure there to get the waste to the Mississippi, but I'm just curious about your analysis of that area.
So our report looks more at the state as a whole and not typically at specific areas. But the authors of that section are experts in the wastewater field. So they may have done some more independent specific to that area, and I would be more than happy to put you in touch with them because they definitely are experts in the area.
Thank you. I appreciate that. One more, Mr. Chairman, if you
Sure,
don't
go
mind. On your slide, fully, what was it? Deferred maintenance. And you talked about the solution, fully funding infrastructure projects. You have a dollar figure in mind of what fully funded might mean to us?
So part of our evaluation is not a full economic evaluation. ASCE at the national level for the United States does do an economic evaluation, but that's not something that we're able to do with our volunteers locally. I think part of what we're getting to in that is it's hard to plan when you don't know what funding is going to be coming down the road. So when you know that projects are going to be, you can plan a project and then build a project and carry through. That makes planning for the future easier. So that's more what we're referring to here, but we do not have a full economic evaluation to go along with it.
Yeah, I would just support that by saying that is very accurate for companies like mine in the construction industry. If we don't know what the funding is going to be, it's hard for us to invest and predict that. And a lot of the funding we see, not necessarily lately from Tennessee, but certainly on a national level, is sort of get us through for a little bit, get us through, and we'll figure it out later type method.
Thank you. Chairman Whitson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and guests. Thanks for coming today. And I just want to share real quick. I took this picture at exit 1 on I-65 at the Welcome Station, and it goes first section of Tennessee Interstate. On November 15th, 1958, the first 1.8 mile section of interstate highway in Tennessee was open to traffic 66 years ago. That section has not changed since then, and that is a challenge we have in this state. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well said. Representative Glenn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here. Excuse me. If our kids had a C, on their report card, we'd probably be a little bit upset about that. And I think we are as legislators that we have a C overall, and even a couple of Ds in there. That's a problem. I know you mentioned debt is one of the big things we celebrate. But is sometimes debt a good thing if it's for the right reason? And I'm not advocating for debt. It's a general
Sure.
question.
Yeah. You're asking for an opinion there personally, right? So I would say this, I think if the investment and need warrants it, which in a lot of cases it does, responsible debt is absolutely a solution in some ways. Does that make sense? Okay.
Follow up?
You mentioned thank you, Mr. Chair. You mentioned the state fuel tax at 27.9, and it took how many years? It took quite a few years to get there, right?
1989 to 2017.
And already we need to raise it again in order to meet the needs of our transit.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things with that. So the gas tax was not indexed in 1989. So for years, that few cents we were getting became less and less valuable, right? So 2017 was almost what I would consider a partial catch-up. It was a substantial advancement of that, but it did not completely bring us to present day. And then when you combine that with the consideration of rising costs of infrastructure, inflation, and different things, we're going to be continually pushing that forward. So I don't want it to be perceived as, oh, we brought it up to even and we fixed it. It was a monumental impact and helped TDOT really get some things going. There'll be more there.
I would also say it's important to note that not everybody pays the gas tax. So we have vehicles that are, if they're fully electric, they're not paying a gas tax. So they're using the road, but not really paying for it the way others are. So ASE supports like multiple different types of funding options to fund these things. I think one way that we can help advance our transportation system is with research. And I know TDOT spends a lot of time and effort on research. So how could we do things more efficiently, or use better mixed design for our pavement, or better bridge design for resiliency? But I guess the fact is all of those things take money. And when we have different things like maybe electric vehicles not paying for the use, or the need for mass transit or bicycle lanes, or all those things, it becomes very complicated. So I think the gas tax was a really good thing, as Lucas said, to kind of bring us back to where we could have been if we'd been indexing to inflation the whole time. But I don't know that raising the gas tax to whatever is the solution. I think it's going to take a lot of solutions working together.
Yeah, there was a lot of discussion about that during Improve, is with more electrical vehicles joining the highway, the gas tax becomes less valuable, right? And they looked at VMT options. They looked at a lot of things during that session. But what I would say is the gas tax in general, the one thing it does is it allows us to capture transient revenue from outside the state, doesn't put all the burden on Tennesseans, which was really important. So to this point, I think it's been one of the most fair solutions, but the client base is changing with the electrical vehicles.
Follow up?
Last question, not really a question. You mentioned bitter winners as something that's becoming a phenomenon, or we do not have the bitter winners in most states. I beg to differ, because when I go down 24 after snow and I hit those potholes, I think it is a bitter winner. So it sounds like to me we probably should not be kicking the can down the road. Really need to address this. And I almost think we may need another $3.3 billion modernization act. So that's just my opinion. But thank you again for being here, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. That's a commitment to vote if one comes, right? Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to point out that with the Modernization Act that we passed, electric vehicles are now paying what was deemed to be their fair share based on average mileage. Hybrid vehicles are paying an additional amount. So we have attempted at least to narrow that gap between, and even the gap between the burden on those who are driving gas vehicles versus those who are driving hybrids or electrics. Not to say that that doesn't need to continue to be revisited as those vehicles get to be a larger proportion of what's on the road. But I just wanted to point out, I think the presenter had said that electric vehicles weren't paying their fair share, and that really isn't true under the Transportation Act. Thank you.
Correct. Thanks for that correction.
Yep.
Representative Martin.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I look at this report card and I see two Ds. I'm very familiar with Ds. One of them on transit, and then one of them on dams. Those two things. The transit, I guess I look at the transit kind of like that's offense. That's something that's in the future. That's something people might want. But dams are something that protect us. So my question for you is this: when it comes to those dams, how many of those dams and what commitment does the state of Tennessee have to maintaining and repairing those dams? Wouldn't it be fair to say that most, if not all, are federally funded?
So one of the issues that we encounter with dams is we don't have a lot of data. So I mentioned like TDOT has a lot of data that is publicly available and that's readily shared. Some of our other areas don't have as much. We don't have a lot of information on locally owned dams. So like if you had a piece of property and you put up a dam, and then years later somebody came and built a neighborhood beneath that dam, we might not have the information on how your dam is operating. So that's one of the major hits to that area of infrastructure is just the lack of data that we have. Now, if you're thinking about like Center Hill Dam, Percy Pre, like if you're thinking about all of those type of ones, they are taken care of by federal. The Corps of Engineers handles a lot of those, and they've spent a lot of money investing. Like I worked on a project at Center Hill Dam a number of years ago, making that just more a better dam. But something to think about with our dams too is when is the last time that we built a brand new dam, right? So similar to our bridges, we have those and they're just getting older. So when you think about age, what they were designed life versus where they are now, they're operating very effectively. So again, the D plus here is more for lack of data on the smaller, maybe privately owned dams.
Yeah, I would add to that too, and I may have this figure wrong, but I think it's something like 2,500 dams are unregulated or uninspected because they're locally owned or they're private dams that we just can't access. So obviously TVA and the Corps of Engineers take care of theirs, like she's saying, and those are the prominent ones people think of, but it's really related to those private things that are unregulated.
Any other questions or comments? I'd like to just add a couple of things. You mentioned the gas tax, and it's interesting that I think it's about 40% of the gas tax revenue collected comes from people traveling through our state. So that helps distribute the burden on the people of Tennessee. You mentioned a couple of times new funding sources. That's something that this committee will be looking at, and I think your presentation dovetails wonderfully into a hearing we hope to have in the coming weeks about identifying the potential for new funding sources, which is critical when transportation gets only 5 cents of every dollar. It's a challenge to catch up $28 billion worth of deferred maintenance. It's really a challenge. So this has been a really good presentation for me. And also with the Improve Act, not the Improve Act, that was 17, but with the Transportation Modernization Act, the new policy, as I understand it with TDOT, is that they used to years ago they'd go out and look at a project and do the engineering and study and put it on the shelf, and it would sit there for 20 years. But the new process is that they identify a project, they also identify the funding at the same time. I think that's going to help us greatly. So we look forward to what's ahead for us, but it's a challenge, and thank you for identifying our needs in Tennessee. Any other questions, comments for our guests? Thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. It's really good information. We appreciate you coming.
Thank
We'll
you
go
for the
back-
invite.
Thank you. We'll go back in session. Members, do you have any questions or comments or a motion? I have a motion to adjourn without objection. We are adjourned. Good stuff.